Darren Hayes didn't expect his day to end barefoot, standing in a freezing puddle on Fifth Avenue, handing his shoes to a stranger in heels. "Take them," he said, breath curling in the cold air. "You're bleeding." The woman stared at him, stunned. Her stiletto had snapped, slicing her foot. Rain poured like it was personal, drenching her silky blouse and soaking her hair to her neck. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. He crouched anyway, pressed the shoes into her hands, scuffed black work shoes barely holding together. "They're dry inside." "Better than nothing." She blinked at him, then down at the shoes like they were made of gold. "You're serious." "I wouldn't be standing barefoot in a puddle if I wasn't," he said, forcing a grin. "Go on." "I'll be fine." She hesitated, then slid her injured foot into one shoe and limped into the other. "You're crazy." "Probably," he said, stepping back as a cab splashed past. "But you're bleeding and I've got socks." She shook her head, almost laughing. "You don't even know my name." "Don't need to," he said. "Just don't get tetanus." She looked at him like she wanted to say something else, but then a black SUV pulled up beside her. She glanced at it, then back at Darren, eyes narrowing like she was solving a puzzle. "You okay getting home like that?" she asked. "I'll manage, thank you," she said softly, stepping into the SUV. "Really?" Then she was gone. He stood there, soaked and shoeless, wondering what the hell just happened. Darren wasn't the kind of man who gave away his shoes. He was a single dad working 2 jobs, one at a garage and another hauling boxes at a storage unit on weekends. Every dollar counted. Every pair of socks had holes he'd stitched himself. But that woman had looked like she hadn't walked a block in her life. And something about her, maybe the way she winced when the glass cut her, hit him right in the chest. He trudged home with wet socks and sore feet, and when he walked into their tiny 1-bedroom apartment in Queens, his daughter came running. "Daddy," Sophie yelled, throwing herself at him. "You smell like rain and oil." "Thanks, Peanut," he said, scooping her up. "That's exactly what I was going for," she giggled, pulling at his damp collar. "Where are your shoes?" "I gave them to a lady," he said, setting her down. Sophie blinked. "Why?" "Because she needed them more than I did." She tilted her head. "Do you like her?" Darren laughed. "I don't even know her name," Sophie grinned. "I think you're gonna marry her." "Yeah?" he asked, ruffling her curls. "Well, she better be okay with cartoons at 6 a.m. and peanut butter sandwiches for dinner." Sophie leaned in like she had a secret. "Only if she brings me a dog." Darren chuckled and carried her to the couch where they watched a lopsided cartoon on a flickering screen. He didn't think about the woman again, at least not until 3 days later when she walked into the garage. "Excuse me," a voice called. Darren emerged from under the hood of a beat-up Buick, wiping his hands. He nearly dropped the wrench. It was her hair tied back in a sleek ponytail, designer coat, heels, no limp, and holding something in her hands. "You," she said, stepping forward, that same puzzled look on her face. "You're the guy from Fifth Avenue." "I remember," he said, still stunned. "Didn't think I'd see those shoes again." She held up a clean, polished box. "I had them fixed, but I also bought you a new pair." He looked at the box like it might explode. "I can't take that," he said. "You gave me your shoes," she said. "And I was rude. I should have asked your name." "It's Darren, Rachel," she said, offering her hand. He shook it, feeling the warmth of her fingers despite the chill in the air. "You didn't have to come all the way out here," she smiled. "I wanted to." Darren glanced at her car, parked outside a sleek foreign thing that probably cost more than his apartment. "You're not from around here, are you?" "Not exactly," she said, eyes darting around the garage. "I grew up in Manhattan." He raised a brow. "So what were you doing walking in the rain with broken heels?" "Trying to remember what being normal felt like," she said, and her voice softened. "I was walking to get coffee. No driver, no assistant, just me, and then crash, and you met a guy with holes in his socks." "Exactly." Rachel stepped closer, holding out the box again. "Please take them, they're Italian leather, I checked." Darren stared at her for a second, then slowly took it. "Thanks." She glanced toward the office. "Do you take lunch breaks?" He blinked. "Sometimes." "Why? I owe you one." "You don't owe me anything." "I want to," she said. "Let me buy you lunch, just as a thank you." He hesitated, thinking about Sophie and the bills and the oil change he needed to finish. "Okay," he said. "But only if I get to pick the place." She smiled. "Deal." They ended up at a tiny taco truck down the street. She wore her coat like armor, but Rachel laughed when he ordered 3 tacos with extra hot sauce and made a mess eating them. "I haven't had food like this in years," she said, wiping salsa from her lips. "You've been missing out." "I've been missing a lot," she said, her tone quieter now. Darren studied her. "You're not just some girl from uptown, are you?" She met his eyes. "My family owns Sloane Hotels." His eyebrows shot up. "Wait, Sloane like yes." He let out a low whistle. "And you're just wandering around Queens giving away Italian shoes?" "No," she said, smiling. "I'm wandering around Queens trying to figure out who I am without all that." Darren leaned back, letting it sink in. Rachel Sloane was a millionaire, and she was sitting at a taco truck with a guy who'd given her his only good pair of shoes. "You're full of surprises," he said. "You gave me your shoes in the rain," she replied. "I think we're even." But Darren wasn't so sure, because the way she looked at him like she saw more than just a struggling dad with grease on his hands was something he hadn't felt in a long, long time. "Are you always this quiet after tacos?" Rachel asked as they strolled along the sidewalk, her heels careful on the uneven concrete. Darren nodded toward a mural painted across a brick wall. "Just thinking." "About what?" He paused, glancing at her sideways. "Do you really want to know? If I didn't, I wouldn't ask." He folded his arms. "I was thinking how crazy it is that someone like you is walking through my neighborhood after eating lunch off a paper plate." Rachel stopped in front of the mural. "Someone like me? You're used to valet parking and reservations. This," he gestured at the food truck still visible at the corner, "isn't exactly that." She studied the mural in silence, a pair of hands cradling a city skyline, paint peeling at the edges. "I wasn't always insulated. My mom grew up in a rent-controlled apartment in Brooklyn. She didn't marry into money, she built it." Darren raised an eyebrow. "Sloane Hotels." She started with one in Miami. "It took 7 years before it made a profit. She opened her second when I was 8. He leaned against the fence beside the wall, watching her. "And now, she passed away last year," Rachel said, her tone even, but something in her expression shifted. "I inherited her position. And all the expectations that came with it." Darren didn't speak for a beat. "I didn't know, I'm sorry." She gave a short nod. "It's not something I talk about much. Most people only care about the money." "I don't," Darren said, without hesitation. "But I get not wanting to be seen for what's in your bank account." Rachel turned toward him. "Then why'd you help me? That day in the rain," he exhaled. "Because you looked like you needed help and I had 2 working shoes." She tilted her head. "You didn't even hesitate. I've learned that when someone's in pain, even for a second, you help first. You ask questions later." They stood in silence again, the city around them humming with life. A train passed overhead, all screech and thunder. "You said you had a daughter," Rachel said. "Sophie," he replied. "She's 6, smart as hell, always 3 questions ahead of me." Rachel smiled softly. "Is she with her mom?" "No," Darren said, pushing off the fence. "Sophie's mine. Her mom left 2 years ago, said she wasn't made for this kind of life." Rachel's eyes flickered. "That must have been hard." "It was," he admitted. "But you figure it out, you show up, that's what being a parent is." They began walking again. A woman with a stroller passed them and Rachel glanced at Darren. "And what about you? What are you made for?" He let the question hang in the air. "Right now, oil changes and bedtime stories." She laughed, but it wasn't mocking. "I like that." He gave her a sideways look. "You could have sent someone else to return the shoes, a driver, an assistant. Why didn't you?" Rachel hesitated, then looked ahead. "Because I couldn't stop thinking about you, about how strange it felt to matter to someone for no reason." Darren didn't answer, but his pace slowed. They reached the corner where her car waited, this time a different SUV, still black, still sleek. "I'm supposed to be at a board meeting in 20 minutes, she said, opening the door. "You better hurry then," he said, stepping back, but she didn't get in. Instead, Rachel turned and reached into the inside pocket of her coat. She pulled out a folded piece of paper and held it out. "I'm hosting a charity auction this weekend. It's black tie, but I'll make sure they let you in with whatever you've got." He took the paper without opening it. "Why me?" "Because I want you there," she said, her voice firm. "And I think you could use an evening where someone waits on you for once." The invitation felt heavy in his hand. "I don't have a tux." "You will," she said. "I'll take care of it." He stared at her. "You don't even know where I live." "I figured you'd come by the garage again." Or I'll find you, she added with a half smile. I'm persistent, I've noticed. Rachel stepped into the SUV. As it pulled away, Darren remained rooted on the sidewalk, the paper still clutched in his hand. Later that evening, back at the apartment, Sophie sat at the kitchen table painting a cardboard crown in glitter and glue. When are we going to go on a real vacation? She asked without looking up. Darren opened the fridge, which hummed louder than it should. Soon as I win the lottery. Can we ride horses? Sure, he said. We'll ride horses on a beach and eat ice cream for breakfast. She grinned and held up the crown for inspection. This is for the queen. I thought you were the queen. No, she said, eyes serious. I'm the princess. You're the king. And Sophie hesitated. She hasn't come yet. Darren paused, then crossed the room and kissed the top of her head. Well, maybe she's just running late. That night, after Sophie was in bed, Darren finally opened the invitation. It wasn't printed on basic cardstock. It was thick, textured parchment with gold lettering. His name was written in neat, deliberate handwriting across the top. He read it twice. Then he folded it and set it on the counter. He wasn't sure what he was walking into, but something told him it wouldn't be anything like taco trucks and cracked sidewalks. And yet, for the first time in a long while, he wasn't afraid to be seen. The rental tuxedo didn't fit quite right. Darren adjusted the collar again, eyeing himself in the cracked mirror above the laundromat sink. The pants were a little too long, the jacket snug across the shoulders, but compared to his usual faded jeans and steel-toed boots, he might as well have been wearing a suit of armor. The invitation had specified black tie. Rachel hadn't sent a follow-up or instructions, just that single gold-etched card and her calm, confident promise, "You'll be there." He hadn't answered, hadn't sent a word. But here he was, standing outside the Sloane Grand on Park Avenue, a building so tall it disappeared into the clouds. A valet in a red jacket opened the door before Darren even touched it. Inside, chandeliers shimmered above a marble floor, and a string quartet played somewhere out of sight. The scent of roses and expensive perfume filled the air. Waiters in pressed uniforms passed with silver trays. Darren stepped in slow, his boots echoing faintly on the polished stone. It wasn't just another world, it was another galaxy. He spotted her before she saw him. Rachel stood near a fountain carved into the wall, talking to a group of older men in tailored tuxedos. Her dress was deep navy, sleek, with a neckline that curved like it had been drawn by an artist's hand. Her hair was swept into a twist that revealed a slender neck and a pair of earrings that probably cost more than 6 months of rent. One of the men laughed at something she said, nodding with approval. Darren watched her nod politely, but her eyes scanned the room once, then again, and then stopped. Her gaze locked on him. She excused herself without hesitation and crossed the room, heels silent on the marble. "I didn't think you'd come," she said, her voice low, her posture relaxed in a way it hadn't been with the others. "I almost didn't," Darren replied. "But Sophie told me I had to." Rachel's face lit up in a new way, softer. "She's the one who really gets things done, isn't she? She threatened to hide my boots if I didn't leave the apartment." Rachel laughed, but it was short-lived. "I'm glad you're here." "I was hoping you'd see this side of my world." Darren looked around. "It's different, too much." "Not too much," he said, meeting her eyes. "Just not mine." Rachel nodded. "Come with me." She led him through the crowd, past silent auctions and white linen tables, to a quieter wing with tall windows overlooking the city. The lights glowed below like fireflies caught in glass. "I used to sit here during events when I was a teenager," she said, leaning against the window. "My mom used to sneak me truffles off the dessert trays." "Was she anything like you?" Darren asked. She was louder, tougher, and she never apologized for wanting more. He stepped beside her. "And you?" "I've spent most of my life trying to prove I deserve to be in her place, but I'm not sure I want to be her." Darren didn't respond right away. "You don't have to be anyone else." She turned to him. "You make it sound simple," he shrugged. "It's not." "But it's honest." They stood in silence again, the city stretching far beneath them. "I had your tux sent to the rental shop," Rachel said after a beat. "I didn't want to overstep." "You didn't. I picked it up on my own," he replied. "I figured if I was going to walk into your world, I should do it on my feet." She looked at him then, really looked. You're not like anyone I've ever met. That's probably because I'm still not sure I belong here. You do, she said quietly. Tonight you do. Before he could answer, a man's voice called from behind them. Rachel. She turned, her expression changing instantly. A tall man in a crisp tuxedo approached. He was older, maybe mid-40s, hair graying at the edges, posture too straight to be casual. Uncle Thomas, she said, stepping forward. I didn't know you were coming. I flew in for the board meeting tomorrow, he said, eyes flicking to Darren. And who's this? Darren extended a hand. Darren Hayes. Thomas shook it, his grip firm. Are you in acquisitions? No, Darren said, unfazed. I fix transmissions. There was a pause. Rachel stepped between them slightly. Darren's a friend. Thomas's eyes narrowed just a fraction. Ah, I'll see you tomorrow, she added. Thomas nodded once, then turned and left without another word. Charming guy, Darren said. Rachel rolled her eyes. He's a traditionalist. Meaning he thinks anyone outside our circle is a liability. Darren leaned back against the window ledge. And what do you think? I think he's spent too long in rooms like this, surrounded by people who agree with him. Darren watched her carefully. You're not afraid to disagree, not anymore. Back in the main hall, the auctioneer's voice rang out and the crowd shifted toward the podium. We should get back, Rachel said. You're going to want to see this. He followed her through the gathering crowd, stopping near the edge of the platform where a velvet curtain hung behind the stage. Rachel whispered to the event manager and was handed a small envelope. She stepped onto the stage. The room quieted as she took the mic. Thank you for being here tonight, she began, her voice clear and poised. This next item is the final piece in our auction. It's not a painting or a vacation package or a custom yacht. It's something a little more personal. Darren frowned, watching her. Rachel opened the envelope. This is a 1-month residency at the Sloane Coastal Retreat. Private villa, personal chef, no cameras, no staff, no obligations. It's not for business. It's for breathing. A murmur ran through the room. People were intrigued. Rachel continued. We don't want your money for this one. We want your story. Write a letter. Tell us why you need it. We'll pick someone who actually deserves it. There was a pause. People looked around, confused. Curious, Rachel held her gaze on Darren. This is what my mother would have wanted, she said finally. For someone to be seen when no one else is looking. Applause followed, but Darren didn't hear it. Not really, because in that moment he realized something had shifted. She wasn't just the woman from Fifth Avenue anymore. She was standing in front of a room full of millionaires and giving away the one thing no one else had offered him in years. A chance. Darren stepped out of the revolving glass doors of the Sloane Grand into the cold night, the city lights hitting his face like a spotlight. He let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The velvet invitation was still in his pocket, slightly crumpled now from the way his hand had gripped it all evening. He had come because Rachel had asked, but he was leaving with something heavier pressing against his chest. The retreat wasn't for someone like him. He didn't need a month at a secluded villa or a personal chef. He needed rent money, a working car, and someone to watch Sophie when the garage ran late. And yet there was something he couldn't shake, the way Rachel had looked at him from that stage, like she already knew his story, and she'd never once looked away. By the time he got home, Sophie was asleep under a blanket fort made from 2 chairs and a sheet. Mrs. Alvarez from next door had stayed with her, as promised, and Darren slipped her a folded 20 and a bag of her favorite licorice with a quiet thank you before she returned to her apartment. He crouched beside the blanket fort and gently pushed back the sheet. Sophie was curled up on her side, one arm tucked beneath her cheek, her breathing slow and steady. He brushed a stray curl from her forehead and whispered, "You were right, Peanut. She did show up." The next morning, he found a small envelope waiting in his mailbox, hand-delivered with no postage. Inside was a handwritten note on thick stationery. You don't need a tux to belong anywhere, but you do belong. There was no signature beyond the single letter, but he didn't need one. He folded it carefully and tucked it into the back of his wallet behind a faded photo of Sophie at age 3, covered in finger paint. The following week, Darren didn't hear from Rachel. Not a message, a note, or an unexpected visit. He returned to his long shifts at the garage, picked Sophie up from kindergarten, and made dinner from whatever was left in the pantry. He told himself that was normal, that she had her world and he had his, but the silence felt louder than it should have. On Thursday morning, a black car pulled up outside the garage just as Darren was finishing a diagnostics report. He wiped his hands on a rag and stepped outside, expecting a customer. But the passenger door opened and Rachel stepped out, her hair down this time, her coat open despite the cold. "I was hoping you'd still be here," she said, walking toward him. "I'm always here," Darren replied, confused. "Is something wrong?" "No," she said, stopping a few feet away. "But something is unfinished." He leaned against the frame of the garage door. "You mean the retreat?" She shook her head. "I mean us." Darren didn't move. "Rachel, your world doesn't have room for someone like me. I'm not a vacation. I don't have time for rooftop dinners and private chefs. I've got oil under my nails and a daughter who thinks peanut butter on toast is fine dining." "I know," she said. "That's what I love about you." He blinked. "What?" She stepped closer. "You didn't try to impress me. You didn't chase me. You didn't ask for anything. And you gave me something I haven't had in a very long time, honesty." He searched her face for any trace of hesitation. There was none. "I didn't come here to complicate your life," she said. "I came because I want to be part of it, if you'll let me." Darren ran a hand over his jaw. "Rachel, this isn't a movie. I don't have a penthouse or a wine cellar. I've got a barely working boiler and a 6-year-old who talks in her sleep." Rachel smiled. "Then I'm already in love with both of you." He stared at her. "You're serious?" "I've never been more serious about anything." He looked down, then back up, something shifting behind his eyes. "And what happens when your board finds out? When your uncle starts making phone calls?" "I already told them," she said. "Every single one." Darren's eyebrows rose. "You told them about me." "I told them I'm stepping back. I've appointed a new interim CEO. I'm taking time for myself, for the things that matter." He exhaled, stunned. "You gave that up." "I'm not giving anything up," she said. "I'm choosing something better." A long moment passed between them, heavy with the weight of every unspoken word. Then Darren reached behind him and pulled the garage door shut. The clang echoed down the block. He walked up to her and gently took her hand. "Come on," he said. "Where?" "You said you wanted to be part of my life," he said. "It's time you met Sophie." They walked the 2 blocks to the apartment, their fingers laced together. When they entered, Sophie was sitting at the table with a plastic tiara and a crayon in her hand. She looked up and blinked. Rachel crouched beside her. "Hi, I'm Rachel." Sophie studied her, then tilted her head. "Are you the one who made him wear the fancy suit?" Rachel laughed. "I might be," Sophie nodded. "Okay, you can stay." Darren watched Rachel's eyes well just slightly before she blinked it away. That night, the 3 of them sat on the couch sharing a bowl of popcorn, watching a movie with talking animals and questionable plot holes. The apartment was small, the lights dim, the heater rattling in the corner. But Rachel leaned her head on Darren's shoulder, Sophie curled up against her side, and for once, everything felt exactly right. Weeks later, on a wind-swept beach just outside the Sloane coastal retreat, Rachel had quietly transferred into Darren's name. He knelt in the sand with Sophie beside him, holding a ring that shimmered in the sun. "I didn't have shoes when we met," he said, voice steady but full. "But I had something better. I had a reason to see someone for who they really were." Rachel's eyes filled as she knelt with him, their hands wrapping around Sophie's. "I love your world," she said. "But I want to build a new one with both of you." And when she said yes, it wasn't under a chandelier or in a ballroom. It was with the ocean behind them, their daughter between them, and their hearts finally fully home. The ceremony was small, tucked away in a glass-walled greenhouse just outside the city, where ivy curled along the beams and lanterns swung gently in the breeze. Every surface bloomed in white peonies and wild jasmine, the air thick with their scent. Soft piano music drifted through the space, played by a young girl Rachel had once mentored through a scholarship program. Outside, the sun dipped low, casting amber light across the polished wood floor. Sophie stood proudly between Darren and Rachel, wearing a white dress with tiny embroidered stars and a pair of silver sneakers. Her curls had been brushed into a halo, and she clutched a bouquet that matched Rachel's small and wild. as if gathered from a field rather than arranged by a florist. "You ready?" Rachel asked softly. Sophie gave a quick nod. "I practiced my line 10 times." Darren bent slightly, adjusting the tiny flower pinned to her sash. "You've got this, Peanut." The music shifted, signaling the start. Rachel took Darren's hand as they stepped through the open archway together. No one gave her away. She had made her own choices, and she walked into this life as an equal, not a gift to be handed off. Their vows weren't read from paper. They spoke them in their own words, voices steady and certain. "You saw me when I wasn't trying to be seen," Rachel said. "You listened when no one else asked the questions. You reminded me that love doesn't come with conditions, but with courage." Darren's hand tightened around hers. "You walked into my life like it wasn't already written in stone. You didn't ask me to change. You just made me believe I didn't have to stay stuck in the past to be worthy of a future." Sophie handed them the rings, nestled in a tiny velvet box she'd carried like treasure. Darren slid Rachel's ring onto her finger, a delicate band with a single sapphire at the center. She placed his on next, sleek, simple, engraved with Sophie's name on the inside. When the officiant declared them husband and wife, Sophie clapped louder than anyone. Later, they danced beneath strings of lights while Sophie twirled between them, laughing as she tried to teach Rachel a move from her school's talent show. Darren watched them with his jacket off, and his tie loosened, chest warm with something that reached deeper than joy. "You're not bad at this," Rachel teased, her heels abandoned somewhere near the dessert table. "I had a good teacher," Darren said, pulling her close again. She tilted her head. "Sophie, her too," he said. "But mostly you." As the guests began to leave, Rachel led him outside to the garden path behind the greenhouse. The stone walkway was lit by tea lights tucked inside glass jars, and the night air held the first hint of summer. "I didn't think I'd ever want this," she said, barefoot on the grass, holding her dress off the ground. "Not the dress, not the ceremony, not the last name." Darren reached for her hand. "But you do?" "I do," she said, "because it's ours. Because it was built from something real." He kissed her then, slow and deep, the kind of kiss that said, "Thank you and I'm yours and we made it, all at once." They didn't take a private jet for their honeymoon. Instead, they drove upstate in a borrowed SUV with Sophie in the backseat, playing car games and singing off-key. They stayed in a rented cabin with creaky floors and a fireplace that needed coaxing, and they made pancakes in the mornings while birds chirped outside the windows. Rachel didn't answer a single business call. Darren left his phone in a drawer. They built snowmen and took long walks and taught Sophie how to toast marshmallows without burning them. At night, Rachel curled against Darren under thick quilts while Sophie snored lightly from her bunk in the next room. Not once did Rachel miss the penthouse or the parties or the pressure. She woke up every morning with her hand wrapped in Darren's and the sound of Sophie's laugh echoing down the hallway. Back in the city, Rachel officially stepped down from the board. She launched a community program in her mother's name, one that helped single parents find affordable housing and job training. Darren helped with the logistics and offered advice from the ground up because he knew what it meant to rebuild from nothing. They moved into a brownstone in Brooklyn, nothing too large, but full of windows and warmth. Sophie had her own room and a puppy named Waffles, who chewed through 2 pairs of Rachel's shoes before finally settling on Rawhide. On the first day of 2nd grade, Sophie stood in the hallway adjusting her backpack while Darren tightened the strap and tucked a note into her lunchbox. Rachel handed her a thermos. "Hot cocoa," she said. "You're going to do amazing things today." Sophie grinned. "You guys are so cheesy." "Only for you," Darren said, kissing the top of her head. They watched her walk out the door, hand in hand with 2 friends from the neighborhood. Rachel leaned into Darren's side. "I never imagined I could have this," she whispered. He slid his arm around her. "I didn't either, but now I can't imagine anything else." They stood there for a long time in the quiet of a morning that didn't need to be grand or dramatic. It was enough, more than enough, and it was theirs, forever.